What's your best true spooky story? Story 1. The scariest thing I've had happened while camping. So I live in Eastern Oregon, and my mom lives in Western Oregon. I went to visit her for the summer, and she's very outdoorsy, so we decided to take the 1-hour drive from her city to the coast. We ended up at this free campsite at the top of this hill, huge foothills of the coastal mountains, about a 25-minute drive from the top, where the campsite is, to the bottom where the main road was. And we were the only campers there. We relaxed for the rest of the day, made food, etc. A truck full of men drive up the hill and talk with my mom. It what about wasn't suspicious at the time. And they leave us. Fast forward to the middle of the night. I wake up to my mom sitting straight up in the tent. I woke up easily, so I heard her gasp, and it woke me. As soon as she saw I was awake, she put her hand over my mouth because I was starting to ask her what's wrong. It was dead silent, and all of a sudden you heard footsteps right beside the tent. The little flap that covers the zipper was even moving. Thankfully, my mom has quick wits and said very loudly, "Kenny, grab the gun." Kenny is my dad, although that doesn't matter. And mind you, he was not there. Just us girls, like I previously said. They left. No harm was done. Thank the Lord for my mama. Story 2. I lived in an old apartment in 2002. The place was built in 1900, so it was just over 100 years old when I moved in. The living room and kitchen were fine, but the bathroom and bedroom were unnerving. Like I just always felt like I was being watched, especially in the bedroom if the closet door was open. Those unnerving feelings just became moderately uncomfortable as I settled in. I felt safe in the bedroom, but only if the door was locked. One night, I was dead asleep when there was a loud bang on my bedroom door. When I got up the courage to get out of bed, I checked the apartment, and all the windows were closed and locked from the inside. The door still had the chain secured. No one was in there. I mentioned the closet in the bedroom. I never liked going in there. And I never liked if the door was open. For some reason, in my head, I would hear gasping noises. So for that reason, the closet stayed closed. A month or more after I was woken to the bang on my door, I was dead asleep. But something woke me up, and it was a pressure on me like being held down. It was pitch black in my room. I couldn't see anything, but I knew some was standing over me. When I could finally turn on a bedside lamp, no one was there. After that, I couldn't sleep in the dark. I had to sleep with a lamp on. That incident scared the life out of me. And after that, the unnerving feeling of being watched intensified. Friends would come over and comment about being uncomfortable in the bathroom, like being watched. It became so uncomfortable for me. When I had the chance to move to another unit, I jumped at it. I packed up and got out. After me, several people rented the apartment, and they would move out within months. I became friendly with the building manager, and I told him that I felt the place was haunted. He kind of laughed it off. Years later, they were renovating the place. The building manager was doing some painting there, and the building owner was there too. I went and checked out the apartment, and it looked nicer. It didn't feel as creepy. I got to talking with the building owner, and through the course of conversation, he just throws it out there that a former tenant committed suicide in the closet by hanging themselves. He also mentioned that the original designer of the building lived in that apartment and died there. I wasn't mad when I heard that, but felt validated that what I experienced was real. Story 3. Back when I was a kid, my grandmother had a really close friend who used to help her babysit us. One day, she goes missing. Family doesn't know where she is, and we don't either. About a week later, police found her body in a dumpster. She had been dead for 4 to 5 days. She had been mugged and had several stab wounds. Incredibly tragic. Who would mug an old lady? Here's the spooky story. A few days just before she was found, my 3 cousins swore they saw her walking around in their backyard and knocking on their window. The following day, a search went through the area. It wasn't until the body was found that we realized what they saw couldn't be true according to the police timeline. but they swore it was her. Edit. I'm adding more context for the story. I initially kept it brief because I didn't want to have a wall of text, but since this blew up a bit, I'll include more details. The backyard was actually pretty big and long because it was shared by the entire apartment complex, which had 4 units, 2 upstairs, 2 down. My cousins were in the downstairs unit on the left. Again, like I said in a different post, it was gated on all sides by wooden fencing. My cousin's window had blind spots so you couldn't see the entire backyard. It wasn't nighttime, but the sun was setting. They said it was almost down at this point, so I assume around 7 p.m. They're in their room, which has a window that sees into the backyard. It was ghetto, and they were pretty poor, so their beds only had the mattress, not the frame supporting it. It was a queen and a single pressed up against the wall with the window. So basically, to look into the backyard, you were standing up on a mattress looking against how you normally face, back against the wall, sitting down on the mattress. Youngest brother. Holy shit. There's someone in the back. She just walked away. Oldest. Laying down on the bed. What are you talking about? Youngest. Dude, it looks like old lady. She's walking around where grandma's vegetable garden is. Oldest. Youngest. Come effing look. She's just walked away. Oldest. Goes and looks. I don't see anything. Stop being stupid. Goes back to laying down. Little one stands there looking at him. Middle brother comes to look a moment later. Oh shit. She's right there. What? She's coming to us. They all look to see the lady knocking on the window. They scream, panic, and run out to Dad. Dad obviously doesn't believe them, but after a bit gives in. He goes out and checks. Nothing. So just a side note, the way these apartments were connected, you couldn't go into the backyard from your individual unit. You had to get out into the main hall, which had a door that opened into the backyard. Story 4. 4 years ago, I lived in a very large farmhouse that was converted into 2 apartments. The house was known as the Old Boys' Home. It was used to house boys with behavioral issues, but was closed due to allegations of molestation. Anyway, I was living with my boyfriend and 3-year-old daughter at the time. My bedroom had a large fireplace that had been boarded up and painted over. I decided to push my bed up against it one day while I was rearranging things. It was like a headboard. That night, around 1 a.m. I had heard a small voice saying, "Mom, Mom, Mommy." I had sat up in bed but didn't see anything, so I reached over my boyfriend trying to grab my daughter and put her in our bed. I kept feeling around and I was still hearing the voice, but I couldn't feel her. My boyfriend woke up and turned the bedside lamp on, asking me, "What the hell are you doing?" I explained that Amelia was trying to get in our bed and I was reaching for her. There was nobody there. My daughter was sound asleep in her room. Then the next night came. Around 1 a.m. again, my dog had started to whimper at outdoor, so my boyfriend got up to take him outside. You know that feeling in a bed when someone lies down next to you, where the bed pushes in, and there is a warmth in your back. I felt that, so I assumed my boyfriend had come back to bed. I rolled over, my boyfriend wasn't in the bed, and I felt the effing bed release pressure. Whatever was laying next to me has gotten up in that second. I moved my bed the next day to the other side of the room, and I never had another incident in the 2 years I remained in that house. Story 5. My wife and I stayed at a nice hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. It was where I asked her to marry me after a lavish meal. I picked the room because it came with a huge Japanese soaking tub that me, a 6'1" man, could barely see over the edge of. Anyway, the first night we stayed there, we were sleeping in the single king bed. I believe the alarm clock said it was 2 or 3 a.m. To my left, and just a few feet from me, I heard the sound of what seemed like a pencil slowly rolling down a sloped surface. It was so deliberate and loud that it woke us both up. It was also so deliberate that, while my heart thumped in my chest from the sudden noise, I quickly convinced myself that it was a pencil sliding off the desk in our room, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, to my surprise, I found that A. There were no pencils in the room, and B. There was no desk. It was my first night in the room, so I assumed that it, like other hotels, had a place to sit and write. Well, that was not the case. The only thing I could find to write with were ballpoint pens with their caps on. They wouldn't make that distinctive, loud noise that a ridged wooden pencil makes as it rolls. Furthermore, there was no sloped surface in the room for anything to suddenly roll off of in the middle of the night/morning. The whole thing was weird enough for us to talk about it that morning. I do not believe in ghosts, but to be honest, I'd love to encounter something unexplained. I entertained the idea of a ghost pencil, but knew in my head it had an explanation grounded in reality. But that's not all that happened. That night we were both in the soaking tub. The water was up to my chin. It was great. We were in the middle of February, a cold and miserable month in Pittsburgh. We were sloshing around in the tub having a blast, pretending we were rich. And then, from the other room, we heard the buzzing of an old microphone hooked up to a PA system. Basically, that sound of feedback that precedes an announcement. The whole room filled with the buzzing sound of microphone feedback. Our hearts thumped in our chests yet again. And then we both practically jumped out of our own skins. We heard the distinctive sound of someone blowing into a microphone to test it. Wooth gooth. You could see it in your head. It was so distinctive, just like the pencil. My heart went from thumping wildly to thrumming like a hummingbird's. Naked, I leaped from the tub and threw a towel around myself. That was a man blowing into a microphone, I said. My wife stayed in the tub, scared and quiet. I searched our room and did not find a speaker or any kind of speaker grill embedded into a wall or the ceiling. We could not for the life of us find a potential source for the sound other than an iHome speaker that was already playing music from my iPhone. So that was our story. We still had one more night. We were exhilarated by our engagement and the ghosts that haunted the hotel. A week later, I had the thought to email the hotel. I asked them about their building. Pittsburgh is an old town, and downtown Pittsburgh is a very, very old town. They got back to me and explained, as my jaw dropped, that they used to be an old telephone factory. I don't know why I found meaning in that explanation or why it made everything click so well, but my thoughts immediately went to the sounds of a factory, the PA system, the drafting table, all relics from another time in that building's life. Story 6. It's not as spooky as some other stories on here, I guess, but my soul and I are still a bit bewildered by it. It's been years, and we still wonder about it occasionally. There's no explanation other than some weird supernatural connection, or just a really big effing coincidence. For about 10 years now, my Nana has been living in a nursing home. She had a stroke and mentally she is not all there. She still recognizes us when we visit and gets happy to see us, but she often talks gibberish, thinking she is in a distant memory in the past. It makes me sad because she and I always had a very close connection growing up. My parents both worked a lot, and she would stay with me. She used to know when I was lying. She could always sense when I was sick, even when she wasn't over. And she and I are eerily similar both in personality and looks. There are pictures of her when she was 21, and it could be me in the picture. We were very close growing up, and I love her dearly. I introduced her to my now husband when we started dating in college. He is from a different country than I am, and I live in his country. So we had been dating for a few years when my visa was going to expire. In order for us to live in one place, we decided to get married. However, we were still young, fresh out of university, and decided to just elope. We decided to get officially married at a courthouse while announcing our engagement and then having a wedding a few years later. Official documents and wedding ceremonies are separated in my husband's country anyways. No one knew of our plan. We were, and are still, stupidly in love and thrilled to have such a crazy secret between us two. In hindsight, it was stupid and no one would have judged us, especially considering we are still happily together years later. But we still decided to hide it because we were stupid kids. So we flew to visit my parents in my home country and announce our engagement, and my dad picked us up from the airport. We were chatting in the car when he told us that my Nana was freaking out while he visited her the other day. The day we decided to elope. Why was she freaking out? She announced to my whole family that she saw in her dreams that I had eloped and was now married. They dismissed her because they didn't expect that at all. She kept insisting and was incredibly lucid about it. She raised her voice, which she hadn't done since before the stroke. My dad had mentioned because he thought it was sweet that she was so worried about this and became so lucid. My husband and I just got silent in the car, and I went cold. We don't know how she knew that, or if it was just coincidence, but she knew somehow. We went to visit her a few days later, and she didn't remember it at all. She was thrilled we were engaged. We are happily married now, and had our wedding and stuff. And no one ever found out we had eloped before the wedding day, except my Nana apparently. Story 7. When I was in high school, my uncle would throw me a couple bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They lived in a 2-story house by the water, a nice area. The kids were about 3 and 6. One day I was sitting in their den on my phone when I started to hear a baby crying. Thinking it was the 3-year-old, I headed to the bottom of the stairs to check and see if my aunt was up there dealing with it. I called for her a couple times with no response. The baby kept crying. I called for her one more time, and when I got no response, I started walking up the stairs. Then I heard my cousins and aunt playing outside. All the hairs on my body stood up, and I literally felt a chill run down my spine. I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs, got in my car, and drove away. The baby was still crying when I closed the door behind me. A few years later, I was drunk at a family party and told my uncle the story. He told me that he and his wife used to hear the baby too, and apparently the previous owners had a kid die of IDS in that room upstairs. He's uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby. He said after that it never happened again. Still gives me the willies when I talk about it though.